Good evening from the Channel's newsroom here in London. Iran is facing fresh pressure to give a full account of what happened to the Ukrainian Airlines plane that was shot down over its capital city last week with 176 people on board. It's after ministers from 5 countries that lost citizens in the crash met in London to demand answers. They lit candles in remembrance of those who died in the crash. Ahead of the meeting, Canada's foreign minister said his country would get to the very bottom of what happened.
Today, 2 investigators will examine the wreckage. The TSB is also ready to deploy a second team of investigators to participate in the aircraft recorder's download and analysis once we know where that will take place. Our focus at this time remains closure, accountability, transparency, and justice, including compensation for the families of the loved ones of the victims.
At least 18 civilians are reported to have died in airstrikes that hit a market and an industrial zone in the Syrian rebel-held city of Idlib. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said bombardments had hit the busy Al-Hal market and the industrial zone in Idlib city. They also accused Russian and Syrian government planes of carrying out the attacks. The airstrikes happened despite a ceasefire brokered earlier this month by Russia and Turkey. Neither the Syrian government nor its Russian allies have so far commented on the latest strikes. An aide to Donald Trump's lawyer claims the president knew exactly what was going on, with efforts to pressure Ukraine into investigating former Vice President Joe Biden and his son. Lev Parnas says he went to Ukraine to put pressure on officials on behalf of Mr. Trump and his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. The alleged intention was to damage Mr. Biden, a potential Democratic rival to Mr. Trump in next year's US election. Mr. Trump has said he does not know Mr. Parnas. Mr. Parnas, though, said Mr. Trump lied, saying he knew exactly who I was. The moment of crisis has come in efforts to tackle climate change. That's according to Sir David Attenborough.
I've had the most extraordinary life. It's only now that I appreciate how extraordinary.
The renowned naturalist and broadcaster warned that we have been putting things off for year after year. Sir David's comments come in an interview to launch a year of special coverage on the subject of climate change. He's highlighting the fact that while climate scientists are becoming clearer about the need for a rapid response, the pace of international negotiations is grindingly slow.
I think that the nations of the world, and particularly young people in the nations of the world, can see the writing on the wall rather more clearly than perhaps elder people who are set in their ways and set in their opinions and don't want to shift, and for whom it is easier to say, oh no, don't worry about that. I mean, it'll happen, we'll have you. That no longer holds. Young people realise that that's not the case. Young people realise that there are serious problems facing us unless we change our ways.
Britain's Prince Harry has met young rugby players in his first public appearance since he and his wife Meghan announced they were to step back from their senior royal roles and seek a more independent future. Prince Harry smiled and shook hands with children in Buckingham Palace's gardens ahead of the Rugby League World Cup 2021 draw, which he also hosted. He also met representatives of the 21 nations playing in the World Cup. Meghan and the couple's son Archie are in Canada, but Harry will reportedly stay in the UK for meetings next week. Residents on Australia's east coast cheered as heavy rains swept across parts of the country, bringing much-needed relief after months of drought.
Oh yeah!
Australians rejoicing as rain fell across Queensland and Canberra. And residents in Winton also celebrated in the mud as much-needed rain soaked once dry fields. Australia has been battling an extended 3-year drought, which, along with high temperatures and exotic winds, have led to huge fires burning along the east coast. The wet weather is expected to bring some respite, but the forecast is that hot weather is expected to return in the coming weeks. And finally, one of the most extreme races on Earth, called La Grande Odyssey Dog Sleigh competition, has started in the French Alps. First introduced back in 2005, the race sees 23 drivers and 300 dogs compete across 9 stages. Humans and dogs alike are currently battling it out over 10 days in the hope of being crowned 2020 champions. In freezing snow and icy winds, the dog sleigh teams will cover around 400 kilometres in total. And that's your international news around the world in 5.